I never thought I would live to see the day my own son treated me like a stranger. That evening, I arrived at his house with a small cake in my hands. It wasn't anyone's birthday, just something I baked because I missed him. I hadn't seen him in months. When he finally opened the door, his wife was standing right behind him, arms folded, a cold smirk on her face. "Why are you here without calling first?" she asked sharply, before my son could even greet me. I froze for a second, embarrassed by her tone. My son said nothing. He just stepped aside, letting me in with a stiffness I had never seen in him before. My heart sank. Inside there were people, neighbors, friends, even some of his colleagues. I hadn't known there was a gathering. Everyone looked up when I entered. Instead of smiles, I saw raised brows, whispers, and that quiet judgment that cuts deeper than words. "She just comes and barges in whenever she wants," my daughter-in-law announced loudly, as though she wanted the whole room to hear. Some people chuckled. I felt heat rushing to my face. I wanted to explain, to say I only came to see my son, but my voice failed me. Then it happened. My daughter-in-law stepped closer and whispered just loud enough for others nearby to hear. "You don't belong here. You're embarrassing us. Go downstairs until everyone leaves." I thought it was a cruel joke, but before I could protest, she nodded at my son. My son, the boy I carried, raised, and gave everything for. He took the cake from my trembling hands, set it aside like trash, and without meeting my eyes said, "Just go downstairs, Mom. Please don't make a scene." The room went silent. Every eye was on me. My knees almost gave way. Before I could breathe, his wife grabbed my arm, dragged me toward the basement door, and shoved me inside. I heard the lock click. Laughter erupted behind the door. Not nervous laughter. Mockery. At me. I pressed my palms against the wood, begging, whispering his name. But he didn't open. He didn't even answer. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had no son. The basement was cold and damp. The air smelled of dust and mold. My hands shook as I groped for a light switch, but all I found was a bare bulb swinging weakly overhead. I sat down on the concrete floor, hugging myself. My chest felt hollow, my heart aching with a pain I didn't know how to name. Anger, shame, heartbreak, all tangled together. How could he? How could my son, the boy I had worked double shifts for, the boy whose fever I stayed up nights to fight, stand there and let his wife humiliate me? Tears blurred my vision. I thought I was truly alone, discarded like nothing more than an old burden. But then, I noticed something strange. In the far corner of the basement, hidden under a dusty sheet, was a wooden trunk. It looked old, too heavy for one person to move. Curious despite myself, I crawled toward it. My fingers brushed across the lock. It wasn't even closed properly. I hesitated. I shouldn't pry. But a cold draft swept through, and something in my gut told me this wasn't just an ordinary storage box. When I lifted the lid, the smell of old paper and ink hit me. Inside were stacks of envelopes, documents, and what looked like photographs. Some were marked with my son's name. Others had dates scribbled on them. Recent dates. I pulled one out with trembling hands. The envelope was sealed, but it had a law firm's name printed on the corner. My pulse quickened. Why would my son hide legal papers in the basement instead of keeping them upstairs with his wife? I stuffed the envelope back, heart racing. My ears strained for any sound above. I could hear faint laughter, glasses clinking, the muffled hum of voices. They were celebrating while I was locked away like an animal. But now, I wasn't just hurt. I was unsettled. Something about those papers, that trunk, the secrecy, it planted a seed of suspicion in me. What was my son hiding? And why did his wife seem so determined to keep me away? I leaned back against the cold wall, tears still wet on my cheeks. My whole body trembled, not just from sorrow, but from a strange, gnawing feeling I couldn't shake. That night, sitting on the basement floor, broken and humiliated, I realized one thing. This wasn't just about rejection. Something far darker was going on in my son's house. And I was about to uncover it. My name is Margaret Collins. But most people just call me Maggie. For 62 years, I've lived a quiet, ordinary life. I was never the kind of woman who wanted much, just a family, a roof over our heads, and love that felt safe. I married young to a man who was charming when we first met. But that charm disappeared after our wedding. He was harsh, critical, and absent more often than not. I stayed, not because I loved him, but because I had a child, my son Daniel. He was my world, my only joy in a marriage that felt like a prison. When Daniel was little, I worked long hours at a diner just to keep food on the table. Some nights I would walk home in the freezing rain, shoes soaked through, my hands raw from scrubbing dishes. But the moment I saw his little face pressed against the window, waiting for me, all of it felt worth it. I remember sewing patches onto his jeans so he wouldn't be teased at school. I remember saving every coin in a jar so I could buy him a guitar when he turned 15. And I remember every time I told myself, he will have a better life than I did. He will never feel unloved. But love, I've learned, doesn't guarantee loyalty. Daniel grew up smart, ambitious, determined to escape the small town we lived in. He got a scholarship, went to college, and from there, he climbed fast. He became a lawyer, bought a big house in the city, married a beautiful woman named Claire. At first, I thought I had done everything right. My sacrifices, my years of struggle, it all led to his success. But slowly, he changed. The phone calls became fewer. The visits home stopped. When I asked if I could come see him, there was always an excuse. Too busy, too tired, not a good time. And when I finally met Claire, I understood why. She was polished, elegant, with a sharp tongue and eyes that looked through me rather than at me. From the beginning, she made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was a stain on their perfect picture. Still, I tried. I told myself she was just adjusting, that she would soften. I told myself Daniel still loved me, even if he was caught between two worlds. But sitting in that basement, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. The humiliation I endured that night wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a reflection of how far I had fallen in his eyes. And yet I couldn't stop loving him. That was my weakness. No matter how much he hurt me, a mother's heart doesn't just turn off, but something shifted in me as I sat there. For the first time, I wasn't just a mother grieving her son's rejection. I was a woman who felt betrayed, used, forgotten. And then another memory struck me, a moment I hadn't thought about in years. When Daniel was still in college, he once asked me to co-sign a loan for him. I didn't have much, but I agreed. Later, I found out he never paid it back, and collectors started calling me. I covered it quietly, never told him, because I didn't want him to feel guilty. But now, remembering that, I couldn't help but wonder. Had I created this version of him? Did I teach him that no matter what he did, I would always forgive, always clean up his messes? Maybe that's why he felt so comfortable letting Claire humiliate me. Maybe he thought I would take it like I always had. As I wiped my tears on the sleeve of my sweater, I realized something else. That trunk I had found, the documents inside. It wasn't random. Daniel was a lawyer. If there were legal papers hidden in the basement, it wasn't by accident. And if Claire didn't want me anywhere near them, maybe she had something to hide. I decided then that I wouldn't leave that house until I knew the truth. My son had already taken my dignity. I wouldn't let them take my mind, too. But before I could dig deeper, I heard footsteps above me. Heavy. Deliberate. They weren't the light steps of guests. These sounded like Claire's heels. They stopped right above the basement door. For a long moment, silence. Then her voice, low, sharp, dripping with contempt. "You should have stayed away, Maggie. You never belonged in his life. Not then, not now." I froze, breath caught in my throat. How much had she known about me, about Daniel, about the years I had sacrificed for him? And why did she sound so certain, so cruel, as if she wasn't just speaking out of jealousy, but out of possession? There was something about her tone that chilled me. It wasn't just hatred. It was ownership. She walked away, her heels clicking across the hardwood floor, fading into the laughter of the party again. And in that silence, something inside me hardened. For 62 years, I had been quiet. I had been patient. I had been forgiving. But now, sitting alone in that cold basement, listening to the woman who stole my son's loyalty speak as though I were nothing, I realized, if I didn't fight for myself, no one else would. And maybe, just maybe, in fighting for myself, I would finally learn the truth about my son. When I was finally let out of the basement that night, the house looked different to me. It wasn't just a house anymore, it was a stage, and I was the unwanted guest shoved behind the curtain. The Collins residence, as Claire proudly called it, was enormous. A 3-story brick home in one of the most expensive neighborhoods of the city. From the outside, it had the picture of perfection. Manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, and tall glass windows that glowed warm and golden at night. But inside it felt cold, too polished, the kind of place where every cushion was placed for display, not comfort. Not a trace of Daniel's childhood was anywhere in sight. No family photos of him as a boy, no little keepsakes I had once saved for him. Everything about the house screamed new life, one in which I clearly had no part. The party was still going when I crept back upstairs. Music floated through the rooms, low jazz mingling with the clinking of glasses. People moved around in elegant clothes, sipping champagne. I kept to the edges, invisible, pretending to be looking for the bathroom. But in truth, I was looking at their life. The dining room table was covered with catered food. The walls held expensive art pieces I didn't recognize, and the photographs on the mantel, all of them were of Daniel and Claire together. At parties, on vacations, smiling in perfectly posed frames. Not one single picture included me. Not one. It felt like I had been erased. I slipped away from the crowd and wandered into the hallway. There, I noticed a door that was slightly ajar. Curious, I pushed it open. It was Daniel's study. Compared to the rest of the house, the room felt lived in. Papers scattered across the desk, law books stacked on the shelves, a half-empty coffee cup left beside the lamp. But what caught my attention was a drawer that wasn't fully closed. I glanced around. The hallway was empty. Heart pounding, I pulled the drawer open. Inside were more envelopes, just like the ones in the trunk downstairs. This time, I didn't hesitate. I took one out. It was another letter from a law firm, different from the first one, but the same kind of official seal. The words jumped at me: settlement agreement. I didn't understand all the legal terms, but one line I could read clearly: payment to be remitted within 60 days or further action will be taken. My breath caught. Settlement? Payment? What was Daniel involved in? Before I could look closer, voices echoed down the hallway. I shoved the letter back, pushed the drawer shut, and hurried out of the study, my hands shaking. Back in the main room, Claire's eyes found me instantly. Her lips curled into that smug smile she wore like armor. She glided toward me, glass in hand, voice sweet but sharp enough to cut. "Enjoying yourself, Maggie? Did you find the basement comfortable?" Her words stung, but I forced a smile, pretending not to notice the sting beneath them. "It was fine, a little dusty." Her eyes narrowed. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Stay out of places you don't belong. This is our house, not yours. Don't forget that." Her tone sent a chill through me. She knew. Somehow, she knew I had been somewhere I shouldn't. I excused myself quickly, retreating to a quieter corner. I sat on the edge of a chair, clutching my hands together, trying to stop them from trembling. The humiliation of being locked in the basement had been bad enough. But now, layered on top of that, was suspicion. What exactly were Daniel and Claire hiding, and why did she seem so desperate to keep me out of certain rooms? As the night wore on, I observed carefully. Every guest seemed charmed by Claire. She floated through the room like a perfect hostess, laughing, clinking glasses, complimenting dresses. To everyone else, she was the picture of elegance. But I saw it differently. Every time Daniel spoke, she placed a hand on his arm, steering the conversation. Every time someone asked a question, she answered before he could. And whenever Daniel laughed too freely, her smile tightened, her fingers digging into his sleeve just slightly, like a warning. It wasn't love I saw, it was control. And Daniel? He didn't fight it. He played along, smiling politely, sipping his drink like a man living on a leash. That realization burned deeper than the humiliation. My son hadn't just changed, he had surrendered. At one point, I slipped outside for air. The night was cool, the garden lit by small lanterns along the path. From there, I could see the basement window, low against the ground. I crouched, peering in. The trunk was still there, closed, waiting. And then, something strange caught my eye. A shadow moved across the basement, fast, as though someone had gone in to check. But I knew no one had opened the door. I backed away quickly, heart pounding. Was someone else in that house I didn't know about? The thought made my skin crawl. When I returned inside, Daniel finally approached me. For a moment, I thought I saw the boy I raised. His eyes softened, his mouth opened as if he wanted to apologize. But then Claire appeared at his side, her hand resting firmly on his chest, and whatever words he might have spoken died in his throat. Instead, he looked away. "We'll talk later, Mom," he said flatly, before being pulled back into the crowd. I stood there, invisible again, but this time not weak. Because now I knew. Something inside that house was rotten, and no matter how much they tried to humiliate me, I wasn't leaving until I uncovered the truth. The next morning, I awoke in the guest room Claire had reluctantly offered me. It wasn't kindness, it was control. She wanted to keep me in her house, under her watch, like a prisoner dressed as a guest. The room itself was sterile, white sheets, bare walls, no warmth. It felt temporary, like I didn't belong, and I knew that was the point. When I stepped into the kitchen, Claire was already there, perfectly dressed, hair flawless, sipping coffee from a mug that probably cost more than my week's groceries. Daniel sat beside her, silent, scrolling through his phone. "Good morning," I said softly, hoping at least my son would look up. He didn't. Claire did, and her smile was like a blade. "Maggie, I think it's best if you leave today. Last night was uncomfortable. You don't fit into Daniel's world anymore." Her words landed like stones. I opened my mouth, but Daniel finally glanced at me, only to nod in agreement with her. "She's right, Mom. Maybe it's better if you go back home. We'll visit you sometime soon." It was as if my heart split in two. I stared at him, my own son, dismissing me like a nuisance. "Daniel," I whispered, voice shaking. "I just wanted to see you. I didn't mean to." But Claire cut me off, her tone sharp. "It's not about what you meant. It's about what's appropriate. You come here uninvited, you embarrass us, and now you snoop around where you shouldn't. This is not your home." Her eyes pierced me, and I realized she knew I had been in the study. I felt my hands tremble, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I only wanted to spend time with my son. Is that such a crime?" Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but instead of defending me, he pushed back his chair and stood. "Mom, Claire's right. You don't understand how things work here. You can't just show up and expect everything to be like before." Like before, the words shattered something inside me. Before, when he was my little boy. Before, when I was the one who protected him, clothed him, fed him. Before, when he loved me. Now, I was just an intruder in his perfect life. Claire rose gracefully, walked over and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. It was a gesture that looked tender, but her grip was firm, like she owned him. "Daniel," she said softly, eyes never leaving mine, "why don't you show your mother that paperwork today? You know, the settlement. Maybe then she'll understand why it's best she stays out of things." My breath caught. She was taunting me, testing me. Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Claire," but she pressed harder on his shoulder. "She deserves to know, don't you think?" He exhaled, defeated. "Fine. Mom, there's something you need to understand. Things aren't as simple as you think." He walked back toward the study, and I followed, my chest heavy with dread. Inside, he opened the same drawer I had peeked into the night before and pulled out a file. He handed it to me reluctantly. The words swam before my eyes as I read: fraud investigation, settlement agreement, possible disbarment. My knees nearly gave way. "Daniel, what is this?" He ran a hand through his hair, not meeting my eyes. "It's complicated. I handled a client's funds, wrong. There were accusations, but it's being handled. As long as we pay the settlement, no one has to know. My career stays safe." I stared at him, horrified. "You stole money?" His silence was answer enough. My son, the boy I raised to be honest, the man I believed was better than his father, was standing before me, guilty of theft. And Claire, she was smiling. "Don't look so shocked, Maggie," she said smoothly. "Daniel did what he had to do. Everyone bends the rules. Besides, it's already taken care of. As long as we can make the payments, everything disappears." Her eyes narrowed, her tone turning icy. "Which is why it's dangerous having you snooping around. You could ruin everything." I looked at Daniel, desperate. "You're letting her talk like this? You're letting her decide what happens to your life?" But instead of answering, he closed the file, shoved it back into the drawer, and muttered, "Mom, just stay out of it, please." The finality in his voice crushed me. Later that afternoon, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. Their voices were hushed, but I caught enough. "She knows too much. If she talks, she won't. She's my mom." "That's exactly why she's dangerous. You trust her too much." I froze, breath shallow, heart hammering. They weren't just embarrassed by me. They saw me as a threat, and in that moment, the betrayal became complete. My son wasn't just ignoring me, he was siding with her, against me. That night, when everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the guest room staring at the ceiling. My mind was a storm: pain, anger, fear. I had come here hoping to reconnect with Daniel, to remind him I was still his mother. Instead, I had uncovered secrets darker than I imagined, been humiliated, and branded as a danger in my own son's house. I whispered into the silence, "If my son won't protect me, I'll protect myself." And for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost: strength. A week later, I was still in their house. Not because I wanted to stay, but because every time I suggested leaving, Daniel insisted, "Just wait until things settle down." His words felt hollow, like he was repeating something Claire told him to say. I felt like a ghost, drifting from room to room, unseen. Claire rarely spoke to me, except to issue thinly veiled commands. "Don't touch that. Stay upstairs. Don't answer the phone." She made it clear, this wasn't my home, and I wasn't wanted. But then one evening, everything came crashing down. Daniel and Claire hosted another dinner, this time not just with friends, but with important people. Lawyers, clients, potential partners. I wasn't told it was happening. I only realized when the doorbell rang and the house filled with men in suits and women in glittering dresses. I tried to stay in the guest room, but curiosity pulled me to the top of the staircase. From there, I could see the long dining table below, candles flickering, wine glasses catching the light. Daniel looked polished, Claire radiant. She was in her element, laughing, guiding conversations, introducing Daniel like he was her trophy. Then unexpectedly she called out, "Maggie, why don't you join us?" Every head turned toward me. My stomach dropped. I descended slowly, confused. Claire never wanted me in her gatherings before. Why now? When I reached the table, she pulled out a chair at the far end. "Please, sit. Everyone, this is Maggie, Daniel's mother." Her tone was syrupy sweet, but her eyes glinted with malice. At first, the guests smiled politely, murmuring greetings. I forced a smile back, trying not to tremble. But then Claire poured herself a glass of wine, leaned forward, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Maggie was just telling us the other day how hard it was raising Daniel alone. Isn't that right? Working in a diner, struggling to pay bills, such a shame, but at least he turned out successful despite, well, all that." The table went quiet. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. She was exposing my hardships not as pride, but as shame. I cleared my throat. "Yes, it was difficult, but—" Claire interrupted smoothly. "Oh, and didn't you say you once had to take out a loan in your own name because Daniel couldn't pay it back? Imagine the sacrifice." My hands shook. My private struggle twisted into humiliation. I glanced at Daniel, begging him silently to stop her, but he avoided my gaze, sipping his wine. Claire smiled wider. "But of course Daniel has made up for it now. He and I are building a future far beyond those humble beginnings." The guests chuckled politely, but I saw it in their eyes: judgment, pity. And then Claire delivered the final blow. She leaned closer, voice dripping with false concern. "Maggie, perhaps you'd like to tell everyone why you were in the basement last week? You seemed so fascinated by that old trunk. Curious habit, isn't it?" My blood ran cold. I opened my mouth, but no words came. She was cornering me in front of strangers, forcing me to either lie or reveal what I'd seen. One of the men frowned. "The basement? What's down there?" Claire tilted her head innocently. "Oh, just some old paperwork. Maggie has a way of stumbling into things she shouldn't." Laughter rippled around the table. And in that moment, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. Tears burned in my eyes. I wanted to scream, to stand up, to defend myself. But my voice was trapped in my throat. Instead, I whispered, "I'm sorry," and pushed back my chair. The scrape echoed in the silence. All eyes followed me as I walked out, shoulders hunched, humiliated. Behind me I heard Claire's voice, soft but cutting. "She means well, bless her heart, but she's not really equipped for this world." The laughter that followed shattered me. I fled upstairs, shutting the door to the guest room, pressing my back against it. My chest heaved with silent sobs. I had survived years of poverty. I had survived a cruel husband. I had survived loneliness. But nothing compared to the pain of being mocked by my own son's wife and ignored by the boy I raised. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, eyes red, hair disheveled. I looked like a woman who had lost everything. And maybe I had. But as I sank onto the bed, one thought wouldn't leave me: the trunk in the basement. Claire had mentioned it in front of everyone, on purpose. Not just to humiliate me, but to send a warning. She knew I had seen something, and if she was willing to shame me publicly to silence me, then whatever she and Daniel were hiding, it was bigger than I thought. I wiped my tears, my body shaking not just from grief but from something new, anger. For so long, I had been quiet, humble, enduring. But tonight, I realized something. If I didn't fight for my dignity, no one else would. And maybe, just maybe, in fighting for myself, I could save my son from the woman who had him trapped, even if it meant tearing apart the world they had built together. For 3 days after that dinner, I barely left the guest room. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the humiliation over and over in my mind. The laughter, the looks, my son's silence. Food trays were left outside my door. Sometimes Daniel brought them up, sometimes a maid I didn't know. I hardly touched them. My body felt heavy, my chest hollow. Every movement hurt, not just in my bones, but in my spirit. I had survived so much in my life, but this felt different. This was a wound deeper than any bruise or scar. This was the kind of hurt that whispered, "You're nothing. You never mattered." One afternoon, I dragged myself to the mirror. My reflection startled me. My skin was pale, my eyes sunken, my hair lifeless. I looked decades older than I was. I pressed my hands against the sink, whispering to the empty room, "What did I do so wrong? Why does my son hate me?" No answer came, just the sound of water dripping from the faucet. On the 4th night, I overheard them again. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but their voices carried through the vents. Claire's sharp, Daniel's low and resigned. "She's a liability, Daniel. You saw how she almost exposed us at dinner. What if she talks to someone?" "She won't," Daniel insisted. But his voice lacked conviction. Claire hissed, "You don't know that. She's nosy. She already found the trunk. We need to make sure she doesn't ruin everything." My heart pounded in my chest. They were talking about me as though I were an obstacle, a threat to be removed. I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from crying out. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window made me jump. I felt like a prisoner in a war I didn't start. For the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own child. The next morning, I fainted. I don't even remember falling, just the crash, the sharp pain in my hip, and then blackness. When I woke, I was in the hospital. Daniel sat by my bed, his face pale, but not with concern, with fear. "Mom," he said softly, "you need to stop stressing yourself. You'll make yourself sick." I wanted to believe it was worry, but his eyes told a different story. He wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of what I might say. A nurse came in, checking my vitals. As she adjusted the IV, she leaned closer and whispered, "Your daughter-in-law told us not to let you have visitors besides her and your son. She said you get confused easily." I froze. "What?" The nurse looked uncomfortable. "She said it's for your safety, that you make things up." My stomach churned. Claire was already painting me as senile, unreliable. She was building a story that I wasn't to be trusted. And Daniel, he let her. Back at the house, my strength drained further. My legs trembled when I walked. My hands shook when I tried to write in my journal. One evening, as I sat in the dim guest room, I opened the nightstand drawer. Inside was a folded piece of paper I hadn't put there. My breath caught. It was a note, written in rushed handwriting. "Don't trust her. The trunk isn't hers. Someone else is hiding things in this house." I read it 3 times, my heart racing. Someone else. I thought back to the shadow I had seen in the basement window. Someone moving when no one had gone inside. Was Claire not the only one hiding something? Or worse, was Daniel not the only one trapped? But even with that new thread of mystery, I couldn't fight the despair pressing down on me. Nights were the worst. I lay awake, staring into the dark, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice crashing down on me. I had given my life to Daniel. I had worked until my hands cracked, until my back ached, until I had nothing left to give. And this was my reward: humiliation, rejection, and now fear. The woman who should have been my family was tearing me apart, and the son I loved was letting her. For the first time, I wondered if it would have been better if I had never come. If maybe disappearing quietly from their lives would have spared me this pain. I sat by the window, staring at the streetlights outside, tears rolling silently down my face, and yet something inside me still burned. That note, that shadow, that trunk. If I gave up now, I'd never know the truth. And maybe the truth was the only thing that could save me. The note in the nightstand haunted me. Don't trust her. The trunk isn't hers. Someone else is hiding things in this house. I couldn't sleep. I read it over and over until the ink blurred with my tears. Someone had been in my room. Someone who knew more than I did. But who? The next morning, Claire announced she would be out all day, meeting clients. Her tone carried that familiar warning, stay out of trouble. Daniel left soon after, his briefcase in hand, his face drawn with exhaustion. For once, the house was quiet. I sat in the guest room, staring at the note clenched in my fist, and made my decision. If there was ever a chance to discover the truth, it was now. My legs still trembled from weakness, but I forced myself down the hallway, then the stairs, until I reached the basement door. The lock had been changed since the first night. A small silver padlock now hung on it. My chest sank. Claire had made sure I couldn't get in, but as I ran my fingers over the padlock, I noticed something odd. The latch wasn't fully closed, almost as if someone had been down there recently and left in a hurry. My pulse quickened. I pulled it free and pushed the door open. The basement smelled of dust and damp wood. My footsteps echoed as I descended. The old trunk still sat in the corner, but now it was open. I froze. Inside, the papers I had seen before were scattered. Envelopes torn, photographs spilled across the floor. I knelt down, picking one up. My breath caught. It was a photo of Daniel, but not with Claire. He was standing beside another woman, younger, holding a baby in her arms. The back of the photo was marked with a date. Just 2 years ago. My hands shook. Daniel had a child? I rifled through the papers desperately. More photos, more documents, birth certificates, hospital bills. The mother's name, Elena Ramirez, not Claire. I sat back, dizzy. My son had a secret family. Suddenly, footsteps creaked above me. I panicked, shoving the papers back into the trunk. I barely managed to slide it shut when the basement door opened. I froze in the shadows. A figure descended slowly. Not Claire, not Daniel. A young woman, thin, pale, with tired eyes. She looked barely older than 25. When her gaze met mine, she gasped, but not in fear. In recognition. "You're his mother," she whispered. My breath caught. "Who are you?" She stepped closer, clutching a folder to her chest. "I'm Elena, Daniel's wife." The world spun. "No," I stammered. "Daniel's wife is Claire." Her eyes darkened. "Claire isn't his wife, not legally, I am. And that," she pointed to the trunk, "is the proof." My knees nearly gave way. Elena knelt beside the trunk, flipping open the folder she held. Inside were marriage certificates, their child's birth certificate, financial records. "I married Daniel 5 years ago," she said, her voice trembling with both anger and grief. "We had a son together, but when he met Claire, everything changed. He told me it was temporary, that he just needed her for appearances, money, connections." Tears filled her eyes. "But then he stopped coming home. He stopped seeing our son. He left us with nothing." My chest ached. "Where's your child now?" Her face crumpled. "Gone, sick. I couldn't afford the treatments anymore. While Daniel was here, living like a king, I was losing our baby." Her words cut through me like knives. I thought I had felt betrayal before. I thought I had known what it meant to suffer because of my son. But this was worse. My son hadn't just abandoned me. He had abandoned his own child. Before I could respond, the basement door slammed shut above us. Elena's head snapped up. Her face went pale. "It's her," she whispered. We ran up the stairs, but the door was locked. Claire's voice seeped through, calm and cold. Well, looks like the rats found each other." Elena pounded on the door. "You can't keep this hidden forever. The truth will come out." Claire laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Truth? The truth is whatever Daniel and I decide it is. And you, both of you, are nothing but problems." Her footsteps retreated, leaving us in darkness. I sank against the wall, my heart racing. Elena crouched beside me, clutching her folder. "She knows. She'll destroy this evidence if we don't act fast." I nodded, my tears blurring everything. "We can't let her. Not for your sake, not for your child's." And for the first time since I had arrived in this house, I didn't feel alone. The betrayal was bigger than me. Daniel's lies, Claire's control, the life they had built, it was all built on someone else's suffering. And now, I had proof. The basement was silent after Claire's footsteps faded. The air felt heavier than before, as if the walls themselves were listening. Elena pressed her forehead against the locked door, whispering through clenched teeth, "She's not going to let us walk out of here with those documents." I hugged myself. the weight of everything crushing me. My son's betrayal, Claire's cruelty, Alina's loss. But then I looked at her. This young woman who had already buried a child because of Daniel's choices, and something inside me hardened. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a witness, and maybe, just maybe, I was the only one strong enough to stop Claire. Hours later, when the lock finally clicked open, Claire appeared at the top of the stairs. She looked flawless as ever, a glass of wine in one hand, the key in the other. "Ladies," she said sweetly, "I thought I'd check in before bed. Cozy down there?" Elena sprang forward, fury blazing. "You're a monster. You knew about me, about our son. And you did nothing. You let him abandon us." Claire tilted her head, feigning pity. "Darling, Daniel never told me the details. Men lie, don't they? All I knew was that he was available and useful." Her eyes shifted to me, sharp as a blade. "Unlike you, Maggie, you've always been a weight around his neck, a reminder of the kind of life he wants to escape." I clenched my fists, but she only smiled wider. Then she dropped the pretense. "Do you really think I married him for love? Please. Daniel's a weak man, brilliant in court, yes, but spineless at home. I saw potential, a career, a fortune, a chance to build the life I deserved, but he came with baggage. A first wife, a child, a mother who can't seem to stay away. So what was I supposed to do? Share?" Her laugh echoed in the basement, cold, merciless. "You see, Maggie, Alina, I don't just want Daniel. I want everything he owns, everything he'll inherit, everything his name carries. And if that means erasing the two of you from the picture, well..." She shrugged, sipping her wine. "History is written by the survivors." My blood turned to ice. When she left again, slamming the door behind her, Elena sank onto the floor, her shoulders shaking. "She's going to destroy everything. Those papers, the photos, they're the only proof I exist. Without them, it's just her word against mine." I lowered myself beside her, putting a trembling hand on hers. "Not just yours, mine too. If she wants to erase us both, then maybe together we can stop her." Elena lifted her tear-stained face, eyes narrowing with resolve. "How?" I looked at the trunk. "By making sure the truth leaves this house before she can bury it." The next day, Daniel returned. His face looked more hollow than I'd ever seen, as though the lies were finally eating him alive. Claire clung to his arm, whispering in his ear, smiling at guests who had come for yet another gathering. But her eyes flicked to me often, sharp with warning. I realized then that she wasn't just trying to silence me. She was staging something. Later, as I passed the study, I heard voices inside. I paused, heart pounding. Daniel's voice was low, desperate. "Claire, we can't keep this up. If they find out about Alina, about the settlement, I'll lose everything." Claire's reply was ice cold. "Then you better make sure no one finds out, especially not your mother," Daniel muttered. "She's my mother, Claire. I can't just..." "You can and you will," she snapped. "If you want to survive this, you'll cut her off, permanently." The words sliced through me like a blade. Permanently. My own son, pressured by her, was considering erasing me from his life for good. I staggered back, pressing my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. That night, Elena slipped into my room, her eyes burned with determination. "I've been watching. Claire keeps the master keys in her dressing table. If we can get them, we can take the documents from the trunk and get them out of here." I hesitated. "And then what? Where would we go?" She held up her phone. "I have a contact, a journalist. If we can deliver proof, she'll publish everything. Daniel's fraud, the secret marriage, the settlement. Claire won't be able to spin her way out." For the first time, hope flickered in my chest, but the risk was enormous. Claire was cunning, ruthless. If she caught us, I looked at Elena, at the pain in her eyes, at the strength she carried despite her loss, and I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for her son, for every piece of truth Claire had buried. I took a deep breath, my voice steady for the first time in weeks. "Then we'll do it. Tonight." That night, as the house fell into silence, I stood before the mirror in the guest room. The woman staring back at me was not the same one who had arrived weeks ago. Her face was thinner, her eyes sharper, her back straighter. I had spent days crying, begging, collapsing under the weight of humiliation. But tonight my tears were gone. For the first time in years, I saw steel in my reflection. I whispered to myself, "No more." Elena slipped into the room, her movements quiet but urgent. "She's asleep. Now's our chance." I nodded, slipping on my coat. My hands didn't shake this time. Instead, they curled into steady fists. We crept down the hall toward Claire's room. Every creak of the floor made my pulse race, but my body moved with purpose. No hesitation, no fear. Elena pointed to the dressing table. The keys. Bottom drawer. I stepped forward, eased it open. The faint glint of metal greeted me. A ring of keys. My fingers brushed over them, and for a moment I thought I heard Claire stir. My body went rigid, but she only sighed in her sleep. I pulled the keys free, closing the drawer as quietly as possible. Back in the hallway, Elena exhaled shakily. You did it. I shook my head. We did it. Now, the trunk. We hurried down to the basement. The padlock clicked open easily with one of the keys. The trunk creaked as we lifted the lid. Inside, the documents were still there. But there were more than we had seen before. I grabbed a folder, flipping it open. My eyes widened. Not just marriage records, not just birth certificates. There were financial ledgers, bank transfers, names of offshore accounts. And, most damning of all, emails printed and signed by Daniel. Proof that he had knowingly misused client funds. Elena's hands trembled as she scanned them. This isn't just fraud. This is criminal. If this gets out, Claire can't save him. My chest tightened. My son. My only son. But then I remembered Elena's broken voice when she told me about her child. I remembered Claire's laughter as she mocked me. And I knew truth mattered more than loyalty. Suddenly, footsteps echoed above us. Elena's head snapped up. She's awake. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to breathe steady. Then we have to move now. I stuffed as many papers as I could into a bag I had brought, clutching it to my chest. The basement door rattled. Claire's voice drifted down, deceptively calm. What are you two doing down there? Elena's eyes widened. She knows. The handle turned, then stopped. She didn't have the key. I held the bag tight, whispering, We go out the window. We scrambled to the small basement window. Elena shoved it open, but it was barely wide enough for a person to fit. I'll go first, she said. She slid out awkwardly, landing in the bushes outside. I passed her the bag. Then, just as I started to crawl through, the basement door burst open. Claire stood there, her face twisted in fury, a flashlight in one hand, a gun in the other. Going somewhere? She hissed. My heart stopped. Run, I shouted to Elena, shoving myself through the window. Claire lunged forward, grabbing my ankle. For a moment, we struggled, the flashlight beam shaking wildly across the basement. Her nails dug into my skin, her voice venomous. You think you can ruin me, old woman? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. But something inside me snapped. I kicked free, forcing myself through the window. The cold night air hit my face as Elena grabbed my arms and pulled me out. We tumbled onto the grass, breathless, clutching the bag. Behind us, Claire's voice screamed from the basement. You'll regret this, both of you. We ran. Through the dark garden, across the street, our feet pounding against the pavement. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. For the first time, I wasn't running away from shame. I was running toward justice. Hours later, safe in a small motel room Elena had secured, we spread the documents across the bed. Elena called her journalist contact, her hands shaking but her voice steady. We have everything. Proof of fraud, proof of bigamy, proof that Daniel and Claire built their life on lies. I sat beside her, my chest heaving, tears streaming down my face. Not from sorrow this time, but from something fiercer. Relief. For the first time since I arrived at that house, I felt power returning to me. I wasn't just a mother discarded in a basement. I was a witness, a fighter, a survivor. And soon, the world would know the truth. 2 weeks later, everything changed. The journalist Elena had contacted published the story. It wasn't just an article, it was an explosion. Headlines screamed from every corner of the city. Prominent attorney caught in fraud scandal. Secret marriage and hidden child rock legal elite. Claire Anderson exposed, the woman behind the lies. Within hours, reporters swarmed the Collins residence. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved forward, neighbors whispered, colleagues distanced themselves. The house that once looked untouchable now looked like a fortress under siege. Daniel tried to deny it at first. He stood outside his office, sweat on his brow, insisting, "These are lies, fabrications. My enemies are trying to ruin me." But the documents spoke louder than his words. Bank records, settlement agreements, marriage certificates, the photos of him with Elena and their child. There was no escape. Claire, always calculating, tried to spin the narrative. She appeared on local television, dressed in white, pretending to be the victim of her husband's deception. But the truth cut through her lies. Journalists uncovered her past, a trail of manipulation, debts, and men she had used before Daniel. Her perfect image crumbled overnight. And then came the moment I will never forget. The state bar held a public hearing. The room was packed. Lawyers, reporters, curious citizens. Daniel sat at the front, pale and trembling, Claire beside him, her mask of confidence cracking. Elena and I sat together in the audience, holding the folder of evidence. When my name was called, I stood. My legs trembled at first, but then I remembered everything. The basement, the humiliation, the laughter at the dinner table. I lifted my chin and walked to the front. I am Margaret Collins, I said, my voice steady. I am Daniel's mother, and I am here to tell the truth. For 20 minutes I laid it bare. How I came to visit my son, only to be locked in the basement. How I discovered the trunk. How Elena revealed herself as his lawful wife. How Claire manipulated every piece of Daniel's life, pushing him deeper into corruption. Every word was backed by documents, photos, testimony. And for the first time, Daniel couldn't hide. When asked if it was true, he buried his face in his hands and whispered, "Yes." The room erupted, reporters scribbling, cameras flashing, voices rising. But I only felt silence inside. A silence that came with release. The verdict was swift. Daniel was disbarred. Criminal charges were filed for fraud and embezzlement. He faced years in prison. Claire was arrested for obstruction and conspiracy. Her face, once admired at parties, was plastered on every news channel, this time as a cautionary tale of greed. The empire they had built on lies collapsed in days. As for Elena, she was finally acknowledged as Daniel's wife. Though nothing could bring back her child, her name was cleared. She was no longer the shadow hidden away in a basement. The court granted her rights over the remaining assets Daniel had tried to conceal, enough to rebuild her life, enough to finally breathe. She wept when the judge announced it, clutching my hand. "We did it. They can't erase us anymore." And me? For the first time in years, I felt whole. Neighbors who had whispered about me now approached with tears, apologizing for ever doubting me. Strangers wrote letters thanking me for standing up against humiliation, for showing that even an older woman's voice could topple giants. One evening as I walked through the park with Elena, she said softly, "You saved me, Maggie. You gave me back my dignity when I thought it was gone forever." I smiled, tears filling my eyes. "No, Elena, we saved each other. Daniel wrote me once from jail. The letter was full of apologies, regret, pleas for forgiveness. I read it, my hands trembling, and for a long time, I didn't know what to do. He was my son, my only son. But he was also the man who had let me be locked in a basement, who had abandoned his wife, who had stood silent as Claire destroyed me. In the end, I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not to forget, but to remember. Some wounds never heal, but they can teach. Now, months later, my life looks different. I moved into a small cottage by the sea. Simple, quiet, mine. Elena visits often. Sometimes we sit for hours, drinking tea, talking about her son, about what might have been, about what still could be. I plant flowers in the garden. I bake cakes again, not out of longing, but out of joy. And when I look in the mirror now, I don't see weakness. I see a woman who was humiliated, broken, discarded, but who rose again, stronger than ever. Because in the end I came to visit my son, and he and his wife tried to bury me, but instead I buried them with the truth. It has been a year since the trial. The storm that once shook my life has finally passed, leaving behind a calm I never thought I would know again. I live now in a small seaside town, far from the noise of the city, in a cottage with blue shutters and a garden that blooms with wildflowers. Each morning, I sit by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the waves crash against the shore. Peace. That is the gift I never thought I would earn again. Elena visits often. She has started over too, working with a non-profit that helps single mothers. When I watch her speak to women who feel lost, I see the fire in her eyes. She has turned her pain into purpose. Sometimes, when she laughs, I catch a glimpse of the young woman she might have been, if not for Daniel's betrayal. And I know her healing has only just begun. We talk often about the child she lost. She carries that grief like a scar, but she no longer hides it. She honors it, and I honor it with her. Together, we have found a kind of family, born not of blood but of survival. As for Daniel, he remains in prison. His letters still come, each one filled with apologies and longing. I read them, but I do not reply. Forgiveness is not something I can give him easily. Perhaps one day I will find it in my heart, but for now, I let silence speak for me. The truth is, prison may be the only place where Daniel is finally free, from Claire, from the lies, from the weight of the image he built. Maybe there, stripped of everything, he will find the boy he once was. But that is his journey, not mine. Claire's name, once whispered with admiration at every gala, is now spoken with disdain. She is awaiting trial, facing years in prison. Her beauty, her charm, her lies, none of them can save her now. When I think of her, I no longer feel rage, I feel pity. For a woman who built her life on destruction, only to end in ruins. As for me, I have discovered something I thought was long gone. Myself. For so many years, I defined my worth by being Daniel's mother. Every sacrifice, every choice, every moment, I gave it all to him. But now I am learning to live for me. I take walks along the beach. I bake not because I am waiting for someone to come home, but because I enjoy the smell of fresh bread. I write in my journal, not about sorrow, but about gratitude. And when I look in the mirror, I see not just a mother, not just a survivor. I see Margaret Collins, a woman who was humiliated, betrayed, broken, but who rose again. If there is one lesson I carry from all of this, it is this. Silence protects no one. For too long I swallowed my pain, endured humiliation, believed love meant obedience. But when I finally spoke, when I stood in that courtroom and told the truth, I found power I didn't know I had. And that power didn't just save me. It saved Elena. It saved every woman who reads our story and remembers. Dignity is not something anyone can take. It is something we choose to keep. So now, when I sit by the sea and watch the horizon fade into gold, I whisper a quiet promise to myself. I will never let anyone lock me in the dark again. Because I have walked through the basement of shame, and I found the light waiting on the other side.